Hi everyone, my name is Gabby and this is my oral interpretation performance of David Foster Wallace's Incarnations of Burned Children. I wanted to go a little bit into the background of the author and his life because he means something very special to me and my own walk of faith. I think his writing says a lot about the need for something deeper and spiritual in our lives. And this was the first piece that I ever read by him and kind of catapulted my interest into his reading his other works. A little bit of background about him. David Foster Wallace has been called one of the greatest writers of the postmodern period in contemporary literature. Wallace wrote numerous essays and short stories, novels, all that, exploring topics about American consumerism, substance abuse, the consequences of secularism, mindfulness, consciousness, and community within an individualistic society. My favorite pieces of Wallace's have been those that explore this concept of self in relationship to those who are existing in the same time and place as us. I believe that this piece illustrates what Herbert Bloomer referred to as meaningful interactions among individuals that come to define the makeup of a society. The universal relationship between parent and child that is explored in this piece, I think, says something on a deeper level about the way that we relate to each other as human beings, while still operating as separate entities within the families and larger societies that we're existing in. If you pay close attention to a recitation of this piece, you will notice that it is written in a very stream of consciousness style, where time and space seem to be moving very fast with little attention to proper pauses and grammar structure. It's a very difficult piece to recite because I often find myself out of breath and needing a drink of water, but I'll try my best. Pay attention to the symbols that revolve around the divine and the ordinary as well, because they're present everywhere and critical to the way that we as human beings make sense of our experiences. Almost everyone at some point in their lives has experienced the sensation of dread, where time stops and something like a tennis ball becomes lodged in your windpipe, while your heart drops simultaneously to the ground. This feeling happens somewhere in between moments of dread and the final outcome, and is a small taste of grief that we will all someday experience, if not already. The artifact that I've chosen again for this project is Incarnations of Burned Children by David Foster Wallace. In the closing lines of this piece, the line, "If you've never wept and want to, have a child," hit me hard the first time that I read it heard aloud. As someone who does not have children and does not intend to anytime soon, there was still this familiar feeling that stayed with me long after reading it to myself, after having first read it, heard it read aloud. I hope to accomplish the same with my own reading of this piece. Hope you enjoy. Daddy was around the side of the house, hanging a door for the tenant, when he heard the child's screams and the mommy's voice gone high between them. He could move fast, and the back porch gave on to the kitchen, and before the screen door had banged shut behind him, the daddy had taken the scene in whole. The overturned pot on the floor was held before the stove, and the burner's blue jet, and the floor's pool of water still stinging as its many arms extended. The toddler in his baggy diaper standing rigid with steam coming off of his hair, and his chest and shoulders scarlet, and his eyes rolled up and his mouth open very wide, and seemed somehow separate from the sounds that issued. The mommy down on one knee with the dish rack dabbing pointlessly at him, and matching the screams with cries of her own, hysterical so she was almost frozen. Her one knee and the bare little soft feet were still in the steaming pool, and the daddy's first act was to take the child under his arms and lift him away, and take him to the sink where he threw out plates and struck the tap to let cold well water run over the boy's little feet. With his cupped hand he gathered and poured and flung more water over his head and his shoulders and his chest, wanting first to see the steam coming off of him, the mommy over his shoulder invoking God until he sent her for towels and gauze if they had it, and the daddy moving quickly and well, and his man's mind empty of everything but purpose, not yet aware of how smoothly he moved, or that he ceased to hear the high screams, because to hear them would freeze him, and to make it impossible what had to be done to help his child, whose screams were as regular as breath, and went on so long they had already become a thing in the kitchen, something else to move quickly around. The tenant's side door outside hung half off its top hinge and moved slightly in the wind, and a bird in the oak across the driveway appeared to observe the door with a cocked head as the cries still came from inside. The The worst scald seemed to be on the right arm and the shoulder. The chest and the stomach's red was fading to pink under the cold water, and his feet's soft soles weren't blistered that Daddy could see, but the toddler still made fists and screamed, except now merely on reflex from fear that Daddy would know, he thought possible later. Small face distended and thready veins standing out at the temples, and Daddy kept saying, he was there, he was there. Adrenaline ebbing and anger at the mommy for allowing this thing to happen, just starting to gather in wisps at his mind's extreme rear, still hours from expression. When the mommy returned, he wasn't sure whether to wrap the child in a towel or not, but he wet the towel down and he did, swaddled him tight and lifted his baby out of the sink, and set him on the kitchen table's edge to soothe him, while Mommy tried to check the feet soles, with one hand waving around in the area of her mouth and uttering objectless words, while the daddy bent in and was face to face with the child's on the table's checkered edge, repeating the fact that he was there, and trying to calm the toddler's cries, but the child breathlessly screamed, a pure shining sound that could stop his heart, and his bitty lip and gums now tinged with the light blue of a low flame, and the daddy thought, screaming as if almost still under the tilted pot and pane. A minute, two like this, seemed much longer, with Mommy and Daddy side-talking sing-song at the child's face, and the lark on the limb with its head to the side, and the hinge going white from a line, the weight of the canted door until the first wisp of steam came lazy under the wrapped towel's hem, and the parents' eyes met and widened. The diaper, when they opened it in the towel and leaned their little boy back on the checkered cloth and unfastened the softened tabs and tried to remove it, resisted slightly with the new high cries, was hot. Their baby's diaper burned their hand, and they saw where the real water had fallen and pooled and had been burning their baby all this time, while he screamed for them to help him, and they hadn't thought. And when they got it off and saw the state of what was there, Mommy said their first God's name and grabbed the towel and the table to keep her feet, while the father turned away and threw a haymaker at the air at the kitchen and cursed both himself and the world for not the last time, while his child might now have been sleeping if not for the rate of his breathing and the tiny stricken motions of his hands in the air where he lay, hands the size of a grown man's thumb that had clutched Daddy's thumb in the crib while he watched the daddy's mouth move in song. His head cocked and seemed to see past him into something his eyes made Daddy lonesome for in a strange, vague way. If you've never wept and want to have a child, break your heart inside and something will. A child is the twangy song the dad hears again, as if the lady was almost there with him, looking down at what they had done. Though hours later, what the daddy won't most forgive is how badly he wanted a cigarette then, as they diapered the child as best as they could in gauze, and 2 crossed hand towels, and the daddy lifted him like a newborn with his skull in one palm and ran him out to the hot truck, burned custom rubber all the way down to town and the clinic's ER with the tenant's door hanging open like that all day until the hinge gave out, and by then it was too late. When it wouldn't stop and they couldn't make it, the child had leaned to leave himself and watch the whole rest unfold from a point overhead. Whatever was lost never thenceforth mattered, and the child's body expanded and walked about, and drew pay, and lived its life untenanted, a thing among things, itself so much vapor aloft, falling as rain and then rising, the sun up and down like a yo-yo.